Welcome to this week's Mind, Body and Relationship Maze. And today we're talking about resilience and how you can build more resilience in your relationship.
And very specifically, we are looking at a model that was developed by Padesky and Mooney, who are both very significant, leaders in the field of CBT today. And they came up with this personal model of resilience, which is a 4-step model that talks you through the various aspects that are relevant in terms of resilience, how to build resilience. Now, do you want to start with the first one? Yeah.
Well, I think just before we get into that, I think the thing is what do we mean by resilience? And why would you want more resilience in your relationship?
Yeah, good point.
Well, there are times where, in a relationship, we all have challenges. You get into a relationship and everything seems great initially. But then there's a point where sometimes, there's going to be difficulties.
Yeah, and what is resilience? Actually, we should have started with a definition, really. Resilience is the capacity that you have to overcome difficulties, to overcome adversity. So in the face of adversity, you have some strategies that enable you to, not necessarily to come up with a solution to the problem, but to kind of not go under with the problem. So the things that we do that enable us to kind of get through the tough stages in our life, because we're all going through difficulties in our life at some point, and there might be small difficulties or there might be large ones. Resilience is that innate capacity that we have to carry us through.
Yeah, and of course, in terms of relationships, there are going to be these challenges, and in fact, if you can work through challenges, your relationship can grow stronger. But to get through the challenges, sometimes, and I don't know if you find this, Angela, is sometimes, I've worked with people where they get to that tough time and they give up and they just leave the relationship or they finish it. However, when you find that resilience to actually work through it, and it can take a lot of strength. There are times where you think I just can't take this any, I just don't know how to resolve this. It's too difficult. But it's working through those challenges. You can bring that relationship closer together.
Yeah, so this is particularly relevant when there's a lot of conflict in the relationship, when it feels like you're arguing all the time, you're not really coming to resolutions. And at the after some time you feel like your resources are running sort of very thin, and you can't quite kind of carry on really. You feel like I haven't got the resources, I haven't got the energy anymore to kind of constantly engage in this. Now, obviously, we've done a podcast on conflict already as well, so you might want to look at some of the tips and strategies that we had suggested there to get through conflict. But it might also be really quite helpful to think about conflict as an indicator in your relationship that you care. So if you're not in conflict with your partner anymore, if you just give up, basically, that's kind of the worst outcome. That means that you're not interested anymore. So if there's a flatness in the relationship, sometimes that's worse than conflict. Conflict shows that you really want to you feel very passionately and strongly about something that you want to address. So think of conflict as a positive in that sense, and think of resilience as something that carries you through this conflict.
Yeah, and to put boundaries on it, when we're talking about conflict, we're not talking about if the other person is being abusive towards you, which we need to be careful about. So if the person is treating you in a way that is upsetting, that is emotionally abusive, those are times that you may need resilience to get out of that relationship. And also resilience is so useful in other areas of the problems in relationships. A lot of problems arise in relationships because of issues outside, like money, when there are financial strains or when there's ill health. It's like, how do you get through those times? One partner could be very challenged, could be depressed, could be in very low moods. And how do you work through those times? And these are the times where finding resilience can be the key to saving a relationship.
Absolutely. So let's look at this 4-step model that Padesky and Mooney came up with, and you can really apply this to all sorts of situations. I mean, big events in life, like loss of income, illness, for example, can be a situation where you require a lot of illness. One partner, both partners are ill. So there are all sorts of situations where this is really relevant. So what are the steps? I've just written them down, so just looking at the notes here. So the first step is to think about an activity a daily activity that you really enjoy. And it could be anything. It could be, for example, the Padesky came up with the example of making coffee in the morning, which I share actually. I really love that. I really love drinking a cup of coffee in the morning. So it could be that. It could be another activity might be that you like going for a walk, particularly in the current pandemic situation. Lots of people actually discovered the enjoyment of walking again. It could be all sorts of things. What do you like doing as a daily activity?
Well, it's a daily activity. Something that I don't always like doing, but I will exercise every day because it's something I know is really important for my health. So it's something I make time for. I can't say it's something I necessarily enjoy, but it's something I have to make time for. So it's something that is part of that day.
Yes.
And just also to put a frame around this whole model as well, there is an acronym. So this first step is search. So it's the S. Yeah. So the whole acronym would be SCAP, and this is search, the first stage. Yes. So you need to search for that thing that you do, that you'd want. If you had an hour free in the day, what would you do? So thinking about, if you had that time off, if you had energy, what would you be doing regularly, daily?
Every day. Yeah. It doesn't even have to be an hour. It could be 5 minutes, could be 10 minutes. So let's stay with, for example, the coffee making. So this is the activity. This is something that I enjoy, that lots of you probably enjoy, or making a cup of tea. Now, think about an obstacle that might get in the way of this activity. So in the example of coffee making, it might be that I realize I haven't got any coffee beans, I haven't got any coffee to make. So that would be an obstacle. Or in the example
or another obstacle could be, basically the coffee's not coming out the machine. Yes. So like, oh no, the coffee's not working. What am I going to do? So that's an obstacle.
Yeah, or I haven't got any milk and I don't like drinking my coffee without milk. So that could be an obstacle, right?
Yeah. And, with something like exercising, so say I was going to do a run, or I was going to do some weights in a day, an obstacle that might get in the way of that could be, I'm just feeling a bit tired. So it could be like your state, your mood, you're kind of feeling a little bit kind of low in energy. Or it could be you've got a very busy day with meetings. And normally the time that you do that, it's not there. So that's an obstacle. Yeah.
So just to recap our steps. So start off with an activity, write it down. So something that you enjoy doing on a daily basis. And now as a next step, think about an obstacle that is getting in the way of doing this activity. Right. Then the next step would be to think about a strategy, right? So what am I going to do now? I've got an activity, I've got an obstacle, I need to address this obstacle, what am I going to do? So in the example of the coffee making, I could knock down at the door of my friendly neighbours downstairs who I frequently ask for supplies when I ran down. I might check with them whether they've got any coffee left or whether they've got some milk.
Yeah, or you could call Tom, go and fix the coffee machine.
Yes, exactly. If the coffee machine's not working, I can do it myself, thank you very much. So I might have to go and fix my coffee machine, right? Okay, or in the example of, what other example do we have? The exercise.
Yeah, so with exercise, so let's take an example of exercising. So let's say, for example, I'm feeling feeling low energy. So what I might do, or I might think of, you might think about what assumptions or what sort of things you might say to yourself when you get through that. And for me, it's thinking, well, I will feel so much better at the end of it. So I know that when I've exercised, I feel more alert. So if I'm feeling tired now, I'm saying, well, this is going to make me feel better the rest of the day.
That's right.
Yeah. Or, or I might think, okay, I'm going to put on a film while I'm running on the treadmill, which is something that I often do. Just it's the only time that I'll actually watch something a lot of the time during the day. So I know that that's going to motivate me. It's going to change my mood by watching something maybe exciting as I'm running.
Absolutely. Great. Okay, so we've got an activity, we've got an obstacle, we've got a strategy that we can apply. And the other thing that we also want to look at in this scenario are our thoughts, our thought patterns. What's the kind of self-talk here that can guide us through this episode where we have to find, we encounter an obstacle, we have to come up with a strategy. What is it that is guiding us through this episode in terms of our thoughts? So we might say to ourselves, oh, this is not the end of the world, right? I've found a new solution here. I've asked my neighbour, for example. Or we might also say to ourselves, well, it's not the end of the world. And also, this is fine. It's just it's going to delay me by 10 minutes. I might be in a rush in the morning. I'm not getting my coffee as usual at the usual time. It's setting me back by about 10 minutes, but so what, right? I can manage this. It's not the end of the world. So these might be some of the thoughts, sort of the self-talk that guides us through this challenge and enables us to kind of keep going.
Yeah, or we could be thinking in different terms of mindset. So sometimes people talk about growth mindset, where we think, well, this isn't going the way I wanted it to, but what can I learn from it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so fixed mindset, growth mindset. With a fixed mindset, that's not helpful in this moment. Then we start thinking, oh my God, this is the end of the world kind of thing. With a growth mindset, we can take setbacks as an opportunity for growth. Yeah. Okay, right. So we've looked at the first step of this model. We looked at activities, obstacles, strategies, and thoughts. Now, with step 2 of Padesky and Mooney's model, we're looking at construct.
Yeah, so we're looking at construct, which is where we start to generalize these strategies into other areas. So, we might think, take, for example, the running machine. So like, say, for example, that obstacle is I don't feel enough energy. So what I do is I think, well, I'm going to put on a film. I'm going to kind of watch something. I'm going to kind of do something that makes me feel good just while I'm doing that. So we might think, well, what strategy could this be in another area of my life? Well, it might be, while I'm doing another task, like say, for example, a task that I might not like, that I might need resilience, such as sort of tidying my desk. You might think, well, yeah, what I'll do is I'll put on this thing in the background. I'll put on a show in the background as I'm doing that. Something that, or, some music, something that we can generalize from that other area.
Yes, or if I generalized from my example with the coffee making, running out of coffee, asking the neighbor for help. So the generalized principle really that we could apply to other situation is ask someone else for help in this situation. Or other ones is go and find out what I need. Yeah, that could be another principle. Or it could be adjust my plans. Okay, the neighbor's not in either. I've got to just adjust my plan here. I'm not going to have my coffee now. I'm going to have it later on when I've got time to pop out and get some coffee, beans, and then I can make my coffee or get some milk or whatever. So I might have to adjust my plans. That's a generalized principle that I can take from this very specific example of the coffee making. So the idea with construct, this step 2, is that you look at the list that you have written down, which relates to your first example, and see whether there are elements of this list that you can apply to bigger obstacles, bigger situations, as it were, situations that might be more challenging.
Yeah, and you might create a few of these strategies. You don't just think of one, think of a few different strategies that could be generalized. And that leads us on to step 3, which is apply. So this is when you come into a situation where you could do with more resilience. So it's not necessarily that you have to find a solution. It's not that you have to achieve the goal, but it's a situation you need more resilience in, or you need to be able to kind of tap into that resource that's going to help you do it in a different way. So it gives you a different sort of mindset, for example. So let's say, you've got a task that you need to be more resilient in, and what you do is you think of some of the strategies that you came up with in step 2. So step 2 being construct, and you think, okay, which of these strategies might help me in this situation?
Yeah, so, think about difficulties in the relationship with your partner. You feel like you're at a dead end. You're constantly going around with the same old difficulties and arguments. So one of the, most obvious strategies, admittedly here, would be, look for help. So you might ring up a friend, for example, talk it through, which might enable you to find some new ways of addressing the difficulty, or to actually develop a different perspective on the conflict situation that you're in with your partner. So if you have a trusted friend who's got capacity to actually advise you in a very balanced way, then that would be a fantastic strategy to apply in this moment.
Yeah, and just as an example of a strategy I applied in my own life, quite a few years ago, I had to travel regularly into London and I had to go on the underground, and it would take me 45 minutes either way, there and back. And I just found it such a waste of time. I found it really challenging. I didn't enjoy it because it was always so busy. So I started listening to audiobooks so I could learn something. And I suddenly looked forward to the journey because this became a way that I could actually enjoy it because I felt I was learning.
Absolutely, great. That's a really good example. Good, and then takes us on to step 4, which is practice. So it's really kind of thinking about, is there a particular goal that you want to set yourself, that you can go out and practice being resilient, and focus very much on practicing resilience rather than focusing on finding solutions to a particular problem. So this particular practice is not about solution finding, it's about sort of sticking with it, staying with it, and noticing that you can kind of get through it. That's the purpose of this particular exercise and practice here. So it's really, just sort of check, can I be, so for example, you're getting into a conflict situation again with your partner. It's not about thinking about, well, how can I resolve this now? Because it might feel at this point in time that you can't. But focusing on, can I stay with this without feeling too overwhelmed and flooded by my partner's demands? Can I stay resilient with this for a little bit longer?
Yeah, or asking these mindset questions again, like, what can I learn from this? Sometimes we feel powerless in these situations. Like, I think, well, we feel that there's nothing we can do. But instead of thinking, well, actually, if there was something that I can do, what is it that I could do? So it's trying to change the mindset. In the example of the coffee machine, asking for help. It could be asking somebody it could be talking to a therapist. It could be, it could be asking your partner. Sometimes when we express, and this is something we've talked about in other podcasts as well, is we don't talk about these things. We just stay quiet, and if we felt upset by something, we hold on to that and we don't express it. But in terms of asking for help, well, we can ask our partner. We start with the words something like, I feel X when this happens. So I feel upset when you go out of the room when we got into an argument, and I'd like to find some way of doing this differently in the future. Absolutely,
yeah. So that's sort of moving in the direction of finding a solution as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's really both. I mean, obviously, if you're constantly getting into arguments with your partner, you want to have resilience as well as a solution on the horizon at some point as well, yeah. But but part of it is about this kind of capacity. It's capacity for distress that you also want to build, and sometimes need to build in a relationship as well. This might be your distress, it might be your partner's distress, or it might be the distress that you create together. If you cannot tolerate that, and this is frequently the case that some couples cannot tolerate distress, you're going to get into some difficulties. So we want you to kind of think about, what is it that you can do here to kind of remind yourself that you actually have got capacity to manage some difficulties and to overcome it. And also to ultimately stay quite hopeful that you can get through this as a couple. Yeah, because I think this is part of the purpose of resilience, reminding yourself of resilience, is to notice that yes, there are challenges, there might be very tricky times in a relationship sometimes, but you can get through them. And that's really what we want you to take away from this.
Yeah, and in terms of some of that resilience as well, it's about building on that strength that we have before. So, if you're going through a challenging time, just acknowledging, you're going through a challenging time. It feels difficult. And then thinking, well, have you felt like this before? And it's quite likely that maybe you have had challenging times before where basically, it's felt difficult. And then thinking, well, actually, you've had those difficult times before where have felt challenging, and reminding yourself, and you got through those. And those times past, you got through those, and remind yourself you had the strength to get through it. So you got through it, even though at the time you might have felt it wasn't going to pass, but it did. You had the strength. So you have that strength to get through it, and that strength is with you now. And that strength you take with you into this situation and into the future. So, every situation that we're challenged by, we can find a way of acknowledging that strength that we have to get through that situation. And each time that strength can increase, even though we sometimes don't realize it, to help us in the future.
Absolutely. Lovely. Okay, so shall we do a very quick recap here of the 4 steps in Padesky and Mooney's model? So the first one is search. Think of an activity that you enjoy. Think of obstacles that get in the way and strategies that you can develop to address these obstacles, and think about your thought patterns as you do so. And then step number 2?
Step number 2 is construct. So construct some more sort of generalized strategies that you can apply in different areas. So come up with a few different generalized strategies based on step 1.
Absolutely, yeah. And then step 3 was apply. So think of a situation that you can apply this particular practice on, these particular strategies onto.
Yeah, and then step number 4 is practice. So the more you practice these things, the easier things get. The more you kind of lay down the neurological pathways so that they become more natural. And the more you do this, the more resilient you do become.
Great. Okay, well, I think we've come to the end, haven't we?
Yeah, great. So thanks for tuning in today. And remember to tune into our podcast next week.
Yeah. We very much look forward to having you join us. And of course, we always encourage you to look at our website, The Relationship Maze, to see the resources that we have developed there, in particular our course, very comprehensive course with lots of material that is relevant to what we were talking about today as well.
Yeah, and if you know anybody who you think would benefit from becoming more resilient, please share this podcast